Hi, everybody. Welcome to February's USA Today Book Club meeting. I am Barbara Wienerberg. I am the books editor with USA Today. And joining me today are reporter David Oliver and the author of this month's book, John Hendrickson, who's written Life on Delay, Making Peace with a Stutter. John is an author, journalist, and senior editor at The Atlantic, and you may know him from when he went viral when he interviewed then presidential candidate and fellow stutterer Joe Biden. We do have a book club giveaway this month. We are sending out 25 hard copies of John's book, Life on Delay. So go ahead and enter if you would like to try to win a copy. And of course, if you already have a copy, which I'm sure many of you do, this is an opportunity to win one and give one away to family or friends as a gift. To enter, visit usatoday.com/delay. I will post the link in a banner at the bottom in a little bit. And yeah, go visit anytime and enter to win one of those 25 hard copies. Before we get started, wanted to let you know that we have selected next month's March's book club pick. We will be discussing the new bilingual poetry collection, Promises of Gold, by Jose Olivares, written both in English and Spanish. I find it a very accessible poetry collection, one that you needn't be intimidated by, and it's one that explores many forms of love. We hope you'll read it with us. John, thank you so much for joining us. And David, take it away.
Cool. All right. Thank you, Barbara. And John, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you and where are you calling from?
Thank you, David. Thank you, Barbara. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm in Brooklyn, just in my apartment. But I've been very much excited about this chat.
Yes, likewise. I'm calling from DC. Barbara, you're in Phoenix, right?
I am in Phoenix, yes.
Cool. So all over. Very cool. Yeah, again, really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today. I know you and I have talked a bunch about your book already. I interviewed you. I saw you speak when you were in DC. But for those unfamiliar with your story, I'm wondering if you could talk to me a bit about why you decided to write this book in the first place and, you know, how it's structured. I know it came out of writing about your stutter and President Biden's, but, you know, what's the focus of this book for those who might be unfamiliar?
Definitely. Back in the fall of 2019, as Barbara mentioned, I interviewed then candidate Joe Biden about his lifelong journey as a person who stutters. When my article was published about a week before Thanksgiving, I was met with this overwhelming outpouring of letters, emails, messages from other people who stutter all over the world, total strangers. These messages kept coming day after day, week after week, month after month. People pouring their hearts out. As they kept rolling in, it made me think I had potentially tapped into a topic here, and there was more to explore. My book isn't about President Biden, but it's about all of the layers of living with this disorder.
Cool. Thank you for sharing that. I'm wondering, you know, what are some common misconceptions about people who stutter that maybe you go over in your book or just in general that you might want people to know?
This is a wildly misunderstood disorder. People commonly perceive it to be a manifestation of anxiety or fear or anything of that ilk. But it's actually brain chemistry. It's also genetic. Roughly 1% of the population are people who stutter. The 3 million Americans. But it's always kind of off stage. It isn't talked about. It isn't written about. It just isn't as around as prevalent compared with other disabilities and disorders. So it can be very isolating, and it can be an uncomfortable topic to talk about. And part of that whole tension is what I'm exploring in this book.
Absolutely. I know that you and I have talked about this before, but for everybody else, I think that you do a great job of showing your disfluency in the text. Obviously with a book, it can be hard to kind of, it's hard to stutter in a book, so to speak, because you're writing all this text, but you do a good job of, putting in long pauses, the trouble with starting words, the blocks that you get. What was the balance like in, wanting to illustrate that for the reader, while also, I guess, writing, just kind of straight that way?
Great question. That was a challenge, absolutely, because the way I'm talking at the moment, pauses, blocks, occasional repetitions, that is what I tried to portray on the page. But I was also conscious of making it readable, because it's a book and you want people to read it. I tried to hit that balance of occasional ellipses to represent a block or a pause, or occasional extra consonants. But I really wanted to focus on the message of the book and people I interviewed, and make it more bigger and broader than disfluency.
Gotcha. I'm wondering, as part of your effort in writing this book, if you maybe read works from other stutterers. I know you consulted a lot of other stutterers and interviewed them for the story, but I'm curious if you read other work by stutterers too, just as part of your research.
There is a great history of people who stutter turning to writing as an outlet, as an oasis. And that was certainly the case for me. People like John Updike, Christopher Hitchens, tons of others. There are plenty of wonderful essays and a handful of books about the topic that are all absolutely worth exploring as a reader.
Right. And you mentioned, writing is a great outlet for people who stutter, but I know it's obviously been a great outlet for you through your process, through your job personally. I again asked you about this before, but want to talk about it again, is that being a journalist and writing about yourself can be really weird and difficult. I know that I do it myself, but do you have a preference for writing about something that you're much further removed from versus writing something personal, or is it all relative? I think we talked about it's important to write what you know. Do you still, is that what you're thinking?
Well, it's hard because one of the great aspects of being a journalist is getting outside one's comfort zone, talking to others, traveling, doing tons of interviewing. But write what you know, cardinal rule of writing, and I think applies to journalism also. I think it's important to find balance. I think it's also important to keep broadening a person's own interests and topics.
If I could ask a question real quick, one of the things that I was struck by reading your book was writing about becoming a journalist and having to overcome a lot of fears and anxieties and blockages in being a journalist, and not wanting to call people on the phone, or having, certain hesitancies to do stories because of your stutter. And I was struck, even though I don't have a stutter, I have anxiety disorder, and I started having panic attacks and experiencing like profound social anxiety around about adolescence. And so there was just so much in this book that, even though I don't live with a stutter, felt incredibly familiar to learning how to be a journalist who would have panic attacks every time I had to call somebody on the phone. I want to speak about that experience becoming a journalist, and I'm wondering, like, how much do you think being a journalist helped you navigating life with your stutter?
Great question. Can I ask, how did you get comfortable managing?
I've never gotten comfortable. I just learned to live in the discomfort.
That's my answer also. It's kind of riding with you. I enjoy this metaphor of a motorcycle with a car on the side. You can keep going places, you can go on adventures, but it's riding with you pretty much at all times. And you just have to manage it, and you have to pick up that telephone, make a call, put yourself out there, do the tough aspect of our job with it right there.
Yeah. I have an occasional stutter myself and deal with anxiety, so I feel all this is resonating with me from both of you, so I appreciate all of that. I was recently telling somebody who was talking to me about their fear of speaking to people as a journalist, and I said, it's good to go out and do things and also reward yourself too. Like after you've done something successful, go like have a drink, have a snack, do something fun for yourself as like a reward in a way, which I don't know if that works for anybody, but it's been helpful to me in the past.
Oh yeah. Well, and David, how have you balanced writing about yourself or any personal issues with being a traditional journalist as well?
I found that it is a good question. I found it very much being like both and. Like, I think that I try and put myself, even though as a traditional journalist, I'm not putting myself in a story per se. I think everything we write and do is informed by who we are. So I kind of view it the same way. I think I can find it easier, more natural to write personally just because it flows out of me more and it's very write what you know and who do you know best but yourself. But I think when you write what you know about and how you think, it's easy to express kind of whatever you want on a given topic because it's just how your brain is processing the information yourself. So I think I don't view it as very separate, which many others in the field might find that like, I mean, what do you mean you have to separate yourself? I can't do that. I don't do that. And it seems to be working out relatively okay. So if there's another way, happy to learn it. But I think I just sort of, I do it all kind of at the same time without really thinking too hard.
Exactly, because at the end of the day, we are journalists, but we are people, we are human beings, and every reader is also a human being. I think we have to relinquish the illusion of like this robot mentality.
I want that like on a billboard or something for journalism. That's so good. I do want to ask about your book tour. You've kind of gone all over the country. I know in DC it was like packed. There were so many people, like standing room only, which is great. Congratulations. But I'm wondering what have been the highlights of this tour? Have there been any surprises? Yeah, I'd love to hear, how that's gone.
It's been the trip of a lifetime and total honor, totally overwhelming. Every place I've visited, many people who stutter have come out to the event and have gotten up and talked, which has been amazing. And they've asked questions or they've offered up a bit of their own personal journey. We talk in the big room of open forum, and we also talk one-on-one afterwards, and it's wonderful just to trade chapters of life back and forth and to learn from other individuals. In a lot of cases, this is the first time people are getting up and talking in a room full of people in this type of environment. I mean, and it's an honor. It's much bigger than my book, and these discussions aren't even about my book. It's just about this whole topic, and it means a lot to me.
For sure. I remember in the DC one, there was a woman who was a journalist and had a traumatic brain injury and spoke about her stutter, and it was very powerful. But obviously, you brought everybody together, so you shouldn't discount yourself by any means. um, what are some of the best pieces of feedback you've gotten about your book, or ones that have meant the most to you?
Readers continue to write me every day, and just again, it's an honor. It takes me a while to reply, but I read every email and I reply to every person. People have told me that they've bought the book, read it, and then given it to their family members or friends or colleagues, and they have said, "This is me." And if you want to understand what it's like living with this disorder, like, read this. And that is just it's such a just an incredible thing to hear as an author. And that was really why I wrote this book. And I wrote it for my teenage individual as well.
Got it. I'm wondering, so you've been on this book tour. I guess you're back at your job at the Atlantic. Has it been strange going back to kind of your day to day, or what's that been like? Have you been balancing kind of both? How's that been going?
Balancing, but it's been great being back and working on other articles, thinking about other topics, because I have lots of other interests, but I've gotten great support from all my colleagues, and it's meant a lot to me.
That's great. Yeah, I know you know a lot about music. I feel like that was a big piece of the book that, yeah, I kept thinking like, wow, I don't know any, like I thought I knew music, and then I was reading this and I was like, I feel like I don't know anything. So it's very helpful.
I love that you made connections with people through music, and you wrote about music being I just the way that you wrote about music was really lovely, which isn't a surprise because you were a music journalist who wrote about music extensively, but I really loved that aspect of the book.
I appreciate that. Some major element of my book, major element of my life. There is music in just about every chapter. I kind of tie it to things I was going through at certain points of my life, but I also interview a couple musicians who are people who stutter, and there's long history of tons of overlap there. But it's absolutely one of my favorite parts of this book.
Great. I did want to ask you too, if you have any thoughts, if you're going to write another book, what it might be about. And now I'm wondering if that might be potentially music focused, but I don't know if you're still coming off of this one, I don't know how much you're thinking about the next one yet. but I know I'm curious.
Well, I promised my wife I'd wait 10 years to even think about doing another, because it obviously takes up a lot of time and attention, mental headspace, and I want to take a breather. I want to try to enjoy this one long as I'm able to, and maybe eventually I'll do another. I don't know.
For sure. I imagine with something so personal too, it's like taking a step back after all of that would probably be good.
Exactly. Have you thought about writing a book?
I would love to write a book. I think someday. I think I'm still percolating on some things. There's definitely a book about grief in me. I know it's there. I've written some about that. I lost my dad last year, you both know, and I feel like I've written a bunch about it, like one piece published, and then I have a ton of notes app, like on the notes app on my phone is just full of like, a bunch of jumbled things. So I know it's there. But I'm trying to give myself some space on the front end just because it's been less than a year. So I want some time, but that will be the book someday. I'm manifesting it, I think. Yeah.
You will do a wonderful job with that.
He really will.
Yeah.
He's a beautiful
thank you
writer.
both. Stop. Don't make me cry on this. This is gonna live forever. So
It just makes me want to praise you more, David.
Oh, stop. Thank you both very much. I did have a writer nerd question for you, John, that I feel like we can all appreciate. I'm wondering, what's the best writing tip that you've ever received on like a sentence level? Like when you're putting together a sentence, like I'm thinking like I had a professor in college talk about how he never wanted any of us to use passive voice ever. And now every time I find myself using passive voice, I like hear him in my head. And I just didn't know if there was something that that you had that you think about on a sentence level.
Great tip. Definitely apply that always. My goal when writing is clarity, momentum, cutting every possible extra word. There's adjective or adverb that just, you're okay. Just, I imagine it like bonsai tree, like you're just always trying to, reading out loud also. And that's hard as a person who stutters. My wonderful wife would read my pages every day, like what I had written in a day, would read it to me, and I could pick out, okay, we need to cut that, we need to trim that, shorten that, and it made big difference. It was big help.
I love that teamwork. Yeah, I was always taught, and I will shout out my high school journalism teacher, Mr. Zlock, I don't know if he's watching, doubtful, but he said the ABCs of journalism were accuracy, brevity, and clarity, and that's always in there too. So some overlap there for sure. And I did also want to ask you about, you are helping bring stuttering to the mainstream in a way. This book is popular. You wrote that piece initially that was very popular. Do you think that society in general has become more accepting of people with stutters? Do you think that this is still something that a lot of society is ignorant about? Where do you think we're at? I know that it's, hard to make a huge judgment call, but in your own experience, I'm curious.
Great question. Tough to answer that. I think visibility on any topic pushes destigmatization forward. But I also think it's a journey. It isn't like that. It takes years and possibly decades, but tons of people who stutter are out there trying to destigmatize it and to just talk about it a little more. And I think that's really important, and I think it's awesome.
For sure. All right, I think we are almost out of time, but this was such a lovely conversation with both of you. I appreciate you making the time for this, but I wanted to, offer the floor for any final thoughts or questions or thoughts, feelings, etc. from either of you.
I want books from both of you. I want more books from John and David. Now that you've said you have a book in you, I'm expecting to see a book from you.
Barbara, you have a movie book in you? You got the movie posters behind you.
I do, hopefully. I have like half a screenplay written in a notes app, and also a book in me about my mom. David, you and I might have something in common there. I lost my mom after a bad illness, and so there's a book kicking around in there somewhere.
We'll definitely chat all this out. We're hoping for all of this.
We're manifesting.
Exactly. Well, again, thank you so much. This was so lovely, and hope to talk to you. I mean, Barbara, I'll talk to you at work. John, hope to talk to you soon.
Appreciate it. Thank you both.
Of course.
Thank you so much.
Bye.